Welcome to our first part of our three-part web coding series. My name is Sean. I'm the Digital Launch Manager here, and I will be your instructor over the next 3 weeks. Before we jump into anything, I just want to get a sense of where we're all at. Has anyone ever coded before? Even if it was a long time ago. Yeah, a little bit. Cool. We're starting from the basics, so don't worry. How many of you have ever just made a website before, even if it was with WordPress or Wix or Squarespace? Cool. Right, we're also starting from the basics there. So, great. So this workshop series, super low on what tech you need. You just need a text or code editor. Mine is the one that I'm going to be using is called Visual Studio Code, which I'll show you the website for that one. So as I like to start all of my workshop series with where are we at in our little roadmap. Today, we are going to do our HTML. This is the coding language that is used for adding any sort of content or structure to your site. So this is like adding text, adding images or videos. And then next week, we're going to delve into CSS. By default, HTML looks like crap on the web. You need something to kind of punch it up and make it look a little bit more modern, and CSS is that tool. CSS is how we add different fonts and colors and font size and layout, position, animation, all of these things with code. And it's a little bit more in-depth than HTML, which is why we split it up into two. So next week, we're going to do the basics. And then the week after that, on the 12th of November, we'll go through some more kind of intermediate advanced things to make it look a little bit better even. That's the website for Visual Studio Code if you want to download that. And then this second one is a short link that I would like you to put in your browser of choice. It can be Chrome, it can be Safari, it doesn't matter. If you type that in and you hit enter, you should be taken to a shared Google Drive file that is a zip file. And that's going to be some just starting stuff for us. It's going to be a kind of a project folder that you can download. It's going to have some images. It's going to have a video that we can play around with. If you don't want to download this because maybe you're running out of room on your computer or whatnot, you can also make your own folder and have any sort of images or videos that you want to play around with putting on your coded website. So while you're getting set up with a text editor, I just want to go through some basics of kind of how the internet works so that we understand a little bit more of these maybe not so hard coding skills for the web. So the internet, in a nutshell, is just a connected network of different devices, different types of computers, and there's really two main categories of these devices. One is this represented on the left. These are what we would call a client device. This is any sort of device that you're using to access the internet. This would be your laptop, your phone, smartwatch, whatever is accessing the internet. And the second category of devices on the internet is servers, which is on the way right side. Servers are basically just special computers that are used to host or store any sort of content or data that is on the web. So when we code up our website, we're doing it on local storage. So no one else who doesn't have access to your computer can actually see your website. In order to make it public, you need to have it hosted or published on a server. Now, when we use our client device, so our phone, our laptop, we use a internet browser like Chrome or Safari, which is just like a user interface for accessing different parts of the web. We put in what's called a domain name. So this is that dot whatever website you want to go to. So this could be usc.edu, this could be annenbergdl.org, or anything like that. That domain name is basically like a user-friendly identifier for the website, right? That user-friendly identifier points to a not so user-friendly identifier of an IP address. This is just a number and period sequence. There's like, I think like 10 or so numbers, a couple periods in there. And this is a more specific identifier for this server. And so every server has its IP address. In fact, every device has an IP address. Our laptops do, our phones do. And it just like lets the internet know exactly what device we're looking for. And that's the process of how we get our websites. We use our device, type in our domain name, it points to this IP address. That IP address tells the browser, go to this server to grab the website files, and then the browser will take all those files, go through it, and then render it out on the screen for you. Something that you might have experienced just browsing the web, that standard protocol for changing information across the web is called HTTP. That's why all of your websites maybe start with HTTP://. This is just how information is transmitted. And they have different status codes depending on what happens. So we got the files correctly is a 200 status. If you try to access a website, but they moved which server it's on, you're going to see that 404, which is a pretty common one to see of just, hey, we can't find that website on this server. Now let's actually talk a little bit about what we're learning today, which is HTML. And HTML is the foundational coding language for the web. Even if you make something in WordPress or Wix, it compiles into HTML for the content. And this stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's basically just text that links to other text, which is basically other pages. And this is how we add any sort of elements or content, and we add structure to our website. And it's typically paired with CSS, which is that styling language to make it look better, and then JavaScript, which is the kind of more interactive, it's going to be more behavior based. We write HTML through these various elements. So every element has a starting tag and an ending tag, except for some you only need the starting one. And these tags just basically tell browsers like Chrome or Safari what type of content this is. So in this case, we have our P tag, which is going to be our paragraph tag. This is just body text that we want to have on our website. In between our starting and ending tag would be our content that we actually want to show. And then you may have some attributes or values that kind of further define behavior or different types of things that you want to happen with this element. We'll get practice with all of this, so don't worry. Cool. So if you went to that URL that is now on the whiteboard, and I also shared on the screen before, and you downloaded that file, you should have probably gotten this wherever you downloaded it, right? So web coding series fall 2025.zip. And if you're on Mac, you can double click it and it should open up into a folder like so. If on Windows, you might have to right click on it and then click unzip or something like that. So in Visual Studio Code, Sublime probably has something very similar. There will be a open folder option. So mine is file, open folder, and might be under a different menu in Sublime. And then just go and open up that folder that you unzipped. So you just highlight it and you click open. So just a little overview of what we have. It's pretty bare bones. So I have my assets folder, which I can open up, and I have 4 different types of assets here that we can play around with. I have an audio file, I have 6 different images, I have 4 logo types, and I have 1 video. In Visual Studio Code, I get this File Plus button for a new file. You can also go to File, and then there'll be a new text file or new file. And now we get to name what our file is. This is just like when you save like a Word doc or you save like an image, what do you want to name it? The only key thing to note about naming your HTML files is when a browser gets to the server where your website is on, it needs to determine what is your home page. What is the first thing that I should show to this user? And what it looks for is a file called index.html. So we're going to create our homepage right now. And so just make sure that your new file is named index.html. Index is just the name, and .html is that file extension. And I can press enter here. So one thing that we need to just make sure before we start any of our code is that it's at the right level in our file organization. So if you can see, I can like open and close my assets, and I don't see my index.html when I close this. What I want is to be able to still see that, right? So in Visual Studio Code, I can either just like click and drag to move it over here. If we want to view what our website looks like, you have our index.html in Finder. It'll also be a File Explorer in Windows. If you control click or right click on it and you do open with, if you find some browser, I use Chrome, but you can use Safari or Firefox, you'll see what your website looks like. And obviously we haven't coded anything, so it's not going to look like anything yet. Cool. All right. So we've gone through like this whole process, and let's say a user's going to our website and the browser's reading through our documents. It finds our index.html file, which is our homepage, and then it's going to start reading from the top line down through the document. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to tell the browsers that this is an HTML document. So we do that with what's called a doc type declaration. And how to type that in is you do your open caret, which is going to be this character. And then you'll notice that Visual Studio Code already has it as my first option, but you can just do exclamation point and then type in full capitals DOCTYPE. And then we're going to hit a space, and then in all lowercase, we type HTML. And then we do our closing caret, which is the opposite of our starting. So this pretty simple line of code just basically tells the browser this is an HTML document, read it like it's HTML, and show me like it's HTML. The next thing that we need to do is tell the browser which version of HTML that we're using. So currently, the most recent version is HTML5. To do that, we're just going to enter to go on a new line. And then we're going to do a open caret. And then in all lowercase, we'll do HTML. And then we'll do our closing caret. Now, Visual Studio Code automatically adds our end tag. If it didn't, just type it in, which is going to be open caret and then /HTML, closing caret. So this little line of code tells Google Chrome, Safari, whatever, that this is HTML5 that we're using. And then all of the HTML code that we're going to write is going to be in the middle of these two. So if I press enter, while my cursor was in between that opening and closing, it should now be in between, even though it's on separate lines. When browsers read through the code, they don't care that much about this extra white space or anything. It just doesn't like read those as extra lines. Okay, so now we have a little bit more kind of document type setup that we like to do when we're coding. And the first one is separating our head section, which is our metadata, and our body section, which is the actual content that gets displayed. So to create that head section, it's just like we did with our HTML tag. It's open caret, but then we type in head. So HEAD and then closing caret. And then if it didn't auto-populate, you do the ending tag, which is the same thing that we just typed in, but just with that / before the word. So this is our metadata section. This is content that is not going to be displayed to the visitor, but this is going to help Google Chrome or Safari or Firefox, different browsers, understand what your content is. And it also helps with search engines as well. When you like search in Google like a keyword, and they're indexing through all of these websites trying to figure out what to show you in the search results, it does look here, and you can add some extra info. If you want to write little notes to yourself in code, you can also do that. So that's done with what's called a comment. So I'm going to go up to the end of my HTML start tag and press enter so I get a new line. To write a comment in HTML, we do our open caret an exclamation point, and then 2 hyphens. So hyphen, hyphen. Now, Visual Studio Code automatically adds the end of that comment, which is 2 hyphens and a closing caret. And now everything that I write in between these two will not be displayed to the user. And I can write little notes to myself about what my code is doing, or as I'm learning through these things. You can write, if you're working with other developers and you want them to know what this does, you can write notes to them. So I'm just going to write metadata section so that I know what our head section does. Okay, so this is just a comment. It doesn't get displayed. It doesn't actually do anything, but just provide us with like internal notes. So now we've created our metadata section, and I want to create the actual content section. So I'm going to enter twice, and I'm going to write myself a comment again. So open caret, exclamation point, double hyphen, and then I'm going to say content section. And again, you don't need to write these comments if you don't want to. These are just for your own use. I'm going to enter at the end, I'm going to do a new line. And to create the actual content section, we use the body tag. So BODY, and then our closing is /BODY. So now when browsers see these, they know everything in between these two head tags, our starting and our end, is our metadata section, and everything between the start and the ending body tag is our content that we actually want to display. There is one more required thing that you need to do with every HTML document, and there's one HTML document per page. So you'd create a new text file, new HTML file for each page on your site. And this is going to be something that's within our metadata section, within our head section. So I'm going to place my cursor in between the start and end tags, and I'm going to hit enter. Now here, I am going to input the title tag. So it's just open caret, TITL, and then the closing. What this does is this configures what your document's title or name is, and this is what shows up in a browser tab. So I'm going to name this, I'm going to do this as like a mock Digital Lounge portfolio website. So I'm going to put in Digital Lounge's portfolio, but feel free to put whatever you would like in here. So the text that is in between our starting and our ending title is our browser tab and the document name. So if I'm going to Command S to save, you can also go File, Save if you'd rather. Now, when I go to my Finder and I double click, or I open with Chrome or Safari or whatever browser I'm using, I can see that my text that I put is now here. Cool. And then whenever you want to reopen the website through that file, you just want to make sure that this is saved. So either File Save or Command S or whatever the keyboard shortcut is. And then I just went to my Finder or File Explorer if you're on Windows, and you can either Control click Open With and pick which browser you want to use, or you can just double click if the default is set to a browser, which mine is, and your website opens up. So I'm going to go down to my body section. This is my content section. I'm going to place my cursor in between them and hit enter. You can also, again, these spaces don't matter. If you don't want to press enter, you can just start typing right here. This is the same thing. It just is a little bit more readable if you have some enters and some spaces. So the first thing that we're going to do is add some headings to our website. The first heading that we want to do is our page title that's displaying at the top. And we do that with our H1 element. So open caret H1 closing. And then you have your ending tag here, which is our open caret /H1 as well. This H1 is our page title. You can technically put in more than one per page, but it's not best practice. So only have one H1 per web page. So here, I'm going to just write in whatever text I want to be my page title. So I'm going to do USC Annenberg Digital Lounge, but feel free to do whatever you would like. Now, if I have different sections of my site, like we're making maybe like a mock portfolio site, I might want to have an about section, a project section, a contact section, etc. we can separate those using other headings. Now, with our headings, they have a descending order of importance by number. So your H1 is your most important. It's your page title. You can only have one per page. And then we can add these other section titles. So these would be H2s. So if you do open caret, H2, closing caret, this is going to be like a section title basically. And you can have as many of these on your page as you want. So I'm going to put one for about, and then I'm going to make some other ones for like a project section and a contact section. So these are just different headings or subsections for our page. Now I am going to save my file. So again, you can do file save or a keyboard shortcut, go to Finder, find my index.html, and I'm going to open that. And I can see we're starting to add some content to our page. As you can imagine, like I mentioned at the beginning, it doesn't look great. This is the default for how text looks with HTML. Next week is when we're going to learn how to change the font, how we're going to change the sizes, stuff like that. Okay, so back to our code. You can go all the way from H1 to H6. So there are 6 levels of heading. So H1 is your page title. H2 would separate it into different sections. H3 would be like subsections. H4 would be subsections. 5 would be subsections. I find I almost never have to go all the way down to H6. Usually at that point, make it a separate page. That's a lot of content. But I have a lot of H2s and maybe some H3s. So I also want to probably have some paragraph text, some body text in my page. And this is using that that tag that I kind of previewed in those slides at the beginning, which is our P tag. So after our H1, our page title, I am going to press, actually, I'm going to do it after our about. So I'm going to put my cursor at the end of our about line, press enter, and then I do open caret, P, closing caret, and then we have our end tag here. So this just marks the beginning and the end of our paragraph text. And anything that you write in here is your typical type of body text. So I'm going to be super lazy and I'm going to go just copy stuff from our website, but feel free to type in whatever you want or copy from wherever you want to. And I'm going to save this. And when I go to my site, I now see that I have my paragraph text here. Now, where I said that CSS is that language that we use to style all of this stuff, there are some very basic text styling options in HTML itself. So the first thing might be if you want to make something bold. So I have this text of like the digital lounge, and maybe I want to make that part bold. How to do that is before the text starts, I add the tag strong. And then after that text ends, I add the /strong. So any text that you place in between these strong tags will be rendered as bold. Remember, to see any of your changes, you'll have to save your file and either reopen it or you can also just refresh. Now, let's say later on down here, I have this digital literacy initiative. If I want this to be italicized, I do the same thing with the strong one, but instead of strong, I do EM. EM stands for emphasis. And so any sort of words that are in between our starting and our ending EM tags are going to be italicized. Okay, so if I go and see what that looks like, I can see now over here that my text is italicized. These also have some impacts on screen readers. So for those who have low or no vision, they might use a screen reader to read aloud everything that's on the website to them. And depending on if you're using strong or emphasis, the screen reader will kind of like read it out loud a little bit different. So like emphasis places on a little bit more vocal emphasis on some text. One more that I actually almost never use, but in case if you want to use for some reason, is the mark one. So same thing, you do the starting mark tag before the text you want, and then you do the ending mark tag after the text. And this one is the marker, and it shows it highlighted. So if you want to highlight text for any reason, you can use the mark tags here. Now, you may notice that I have this huge block of text, and if I want to add some space in between, if I start putting a bunch of enters in my code and I save and I refresh, nothing changes here, right? Now remember that browsers don't care about all of this extra white space. So if you want to add some line breaks anywhere, we use the BR tag. This one is one of those kind of special tags that you don't need that ending, that closing tag. So you don't need something like this. So for every BR, it'll start to add another line. So if I save and I refresh, you'll notice where I put that BR tag, it starts a new line. If I want another one to have some like actual white space in between, I just put in another BR tag after, and that just stands for break. Now, if we go back to our code, maybe before my H1, before my page title, if I were to go to something like when I copied from the Digital Lounge website, maybe I want to have like a menu or something like this. How would I create something like that? Typically, we use a list there. And it's going to look weird for a navigation menu with just HTML, but when you style it later on, it can start to look a lot better. So I'm going to I'll place it after my page title. So create a new line after your H1. And there are two types of lists that you can create in HTML. So one is going to be our ordered list, which is the OL element. The ordered list is numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, typically used for steps. If you're like making like a recipe online, you'd probably have all those steps as an ordered list. The other one is your unordered list, which instead of the O, it's U. So our ordered list is numbers. Our unordered list is going to be bullet points. And you can change what they look like with CSS later on. But for now, we'll just keep it like this. So in order to add those different elements to your list, you go in between where your list starts and ends. And I'm just going to press enter for readability. And we add a list item. And you do this with the LI tag. So it's LI, and then you have the closing. So LI stands for list item, and this is how you add those individual elements to your list. So I'm going to do just list item 1, and I'm going to copy and paste this a couple times just so we have some samples. Okay. And you use list item for both ordered and unordered lists. So now to show you what that looks like, if I save and go back to my site, I can see them right here. So I first have my ordered list with my 3 list items, and they're automatically numbered. And then I have my unordered list with my 3 list items, and those automatically get those bullets. I want us to start adding some links because a website that is one page isn't that fun. We want to link to other places, including our own other pages. So I want you to create another HTML file in this folder. So in our web coding series folder, I'm just going to click this +1. It might add it to my assets. So now we want to add some link to go. We click on it and it will go to our other page. And I'll also show you how to link to other websites as well. So somewhere within your body section, I'm just going to go at the very bottom underneath contact, but you can do it wherever. If you want to add some links, we use what's called the A tag. So it's just the letter A, and this stands for anchor. And this is just basically the text that's going to show that when you click on it, it's going to link to somewhere else. So in between these two, I'm just going to say link to other page. And I'm going to create another one here underneath. And I'm going to say link to USC website, because I want to show you 2 different ways that you can write file paths. So we get our fun attributes here. If you remember from like when I showed you the breakdown of these elements, there's like attribute equals value. So we're going to start adding some here. So in order to add where you want this link to go to, you go within the starting tag. So we have open caret A, and then my cursor's right after the A. I'm going to press space, and then I'm going to type in href. And this stands for hyperlink reference. And this is just basically, where does this link point to? Where is the destination? So I'm going to do href equals, and then I'm going to get some quotation marks that auto-populate for me. If they don't for you, you can add them here. Now, where you want it to go is in between these quotation marks. So I want my link to the USC website to actually go to usc.edu. So I'm just going to go in here and I am going to Command C, or you can Command just copy. You can also type it out, and I'm going to Command V. So this might be something that you've seen before, that you've typed in before. It's basically just this whole URL for the site that you're trying to go to. When you see the URL as the full https:// this is what we call an absolute file path. And this is just basically like, this is the destination, it lives somewhere, the browser figures out where it is. But you may notice that we don't have our website available somewhere right now. So far, it's just saved on our computer, and we don't want to have to like publish it all before adding links to our other pages. So we can also do relative file paths. So I'm going to do href equals again. And remember, this is how you add the destination for your link. Now, in code, there are ways that you can tell the code, hey, look within the same folder that this file is in. Okay, so how to do that is I'm going to press period /. So this little bit of code, period / is telling the code renderer, look in the same folder that this current file is in. So this is when I was saying like, hey, remember, don't get your index.html outside of your assets folder. This is why. Because now I do period /. The code says, oh, we're in the web coding series fall 2025 folder. And then VS Code does this, Sublime probably does, where it shows you what you can fill in for the rest. So if I want to go to my page.html, I can just put that in. So this bit of code tells the code, the browsers, look in the same folder that this current file of index.html is in, and look for a page, or look for a file called page.html. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go over to my page.html file, and I'm just going to quickly add some stuff. You don't need to. I'm just going to make sure that we can see that we actually went to that right page. So I'm going to do my H1. Okay. So now when I go back to my site, I see my link to my other page and my link to my USC website. When I click link to USC website, it takes me there. Now, when I click link to other page, it goes to my page.html file that I just quickly set up over here. I didn't have you go through that, just wanted to show you. Now, if your other page or something else that you're trying to link to is in a different place, you might have to change this here. Now, let's say you made a mistake and your index.html folder is within your assets folder. If you want to go back, if you want to say like, hey, don't look at the current folder that I'm in, but look at the folder that my folder is within, you do 2 periods at the front. So I would do double period /. And because my folder is saved on my desktop, it's showing me all of the things on my desktop. Now, I'm going to just add some white space so that it looks a little bit better for us. And under my projects heading, we're going to add some stuff and play around with these media elements. So this is where we're now going to learn how to put images in. But before we do that, I'm going to show you a little piece of code that's not going to actually change how any of this looks, but it's going to help us next week with CSS. And that is called the div. So you do open caret div closing caret. This little bit of code does nothing on its own. This is just a way to group things together. So sometimes when you are coding stuff, they might be separate elements, but they might go together, right? So in our case, we maybe want to create something like this. This is actually almost exactly what we're trying to recreate in a sense, where we have this bit of a card. There's this image here, there's some text, there's a background, there's another one over here. The image and the text are separate items. They're separate elements in the code, but they're grouped together. And that's how we use our div, is just grouping elements together so that we can style them together. It's really helpful with layouts, okay? So now anything that you want to group together, you just input in the div. So I'm gonna press enter for readability. And to add an image into your website, you use the img tag. Now you'll notice as I closed it, it didn't add an end tag for me. And that is because image is one of those fancy ones that you don't need one for. So this is going to be our image. Now to say what image we actually want to use, we do something very similar to our links down here. Instead of href, which is our hyperlink reference destination, we do SRC, and that stands for source. So think of href as a destination to where you're going, and source as that you're pulling from somewhere else. So now we need to say where we're pulling from. So after SRC, we do equals. So source equals, and then we have our quotations, and we do our same file path stuff that we've been doing to find our image. So in this case, I want to say, look in my same web coding series folder that my index.html file is in. So period /. My images are located in an assets folder. So I have to say it's somewhere within assets. I have another folder in there called images. So I have to access that. And then I have all of those images that are listed in there. You also just can type project1image.jpg. So now if I save and I go back to my site, my image loads in. This is a huge image, and it's going to show the image as its original file size. Now, I typically like to resize my images with CSS just to keep all of the styling together. But because that's a little annoying right now, there is a way that you do it in HTML. So you can add more attributes after. So I'm after my file path. After the quotations, I press space, and I can set a height equals, and then set a value. Let's just try, I don't know, 600 pixels. And then you can add another one for width as well. And let's just try 1200 pixels. And when I save that and I refresh over here, my image is now resized to those dimensions that I provided. So this is all within our image tag. We have our source to pull what the actual image is. We have the height to say how tall we want the image to be, and the width to say how wide we want the image to be. EX stands for pixels. Basically, every screen is just a series of really small squares called pixels, and this is just the number of those. There is one more attribute that I want to introduce for images. Have any of you heard of alt text or alternative text before? No? Cool. Well, happy introduction. So I'm going to do another attribute in here. So space at the end, ALT, which stands for alt. And we're going to do equals again. And then in between these quotes, I can write a description of this image. So this image is like the ocean meeting like a rocky shore type thing, right? So I'm just going to type an ocean meeting the rocky shore. So this is alt stands for alternative text. This is text that will display if your image can't load for any reason. So you can write something of like, hey, if the image doesn't load, I still want someone to know what the image would have been. So you can write that text in here. This is also super important for those screen readers I mentioned earlier. Screen readers don't know what images are. They look, they see that there's an image, but it doesn't know what the image actually is. And so for those who are using a screen reader to get your web content, it reads out this alt text instead. So those with low or no vision are still not missing out on your web content. And the last reason why alt text is super important is that it's really good for search engine optimization or making your web content appear higher in like Google search rankings. Again, those search engines don't know what your image is. And so in order to understand more about what your web page is about so that it can surface it to those who are searching relevant keywords, it looks at this alt text. You should ideally have an alt text for every image that you put up there. So after we've done our images, we also probably want to add some other media elements to our site, right? So if you want to add a video, it's very similar to adding an image. We just use the video tag instead. So video, and then here. You'll notice that this one does have an end tag though. So video does have a start and an end. Now, the text that you put in between the video is going to be what shows if your video can't load. So I'm going to say like your browser doesn't support video, which would be very rare. Now, for it to actually know what video to play, we do the same thing that we did with our image. So we add the src attribute equals, and then we have our quotation marks. Mine auto adds, you might have to add yours. We can do our period / to say, look in our current folder, and then it's in our assets. And then I do another / to go to the next bits. And then I can do video / and then the name of our video here is turtle.mp4. And if I save this and I go back to my site and I refresh, you'll notice I get a big black box. Isn't that awesome? So the reason why this happens is we are missing an attribute that tells the video to either allow us to click play or to just automatically play. So if I go back to my code, again, we add our attributes in our beginning tag, our start tag. So at the end, I'm going to do another space. Ideally, you want users to be able to control the video to start it or stop it. And to add those video controls, we just put in the keyword controls. That's all you need. And now if I save this and I go back and I refresh, I do get a little basic video player down here. And I can click play and my video plays. Now, if you do want your video to play automatically when the page loads, the attribute for that is autoplay. Makes super sense. Now, with our video, once it plays, at the very end, it just stops. If you do want it to loop and continue to play, the keyword for that is just loop. So let me save that and I'll refresh and I'll go through and it just automatically loops once it's done playing. Lastly, if the autoplay does work and it's going and you have a video that has really loud audio, it might scare someone on your website, which you probably don't want. So if you want to start the video with autoplay, I recommend adding muted as a keyword. This just basically says at the beginning, the audio is just muted as it plays. Again, with the controls, you do get access to change, but muted just says by default, the video's audio doesn't play or is not loud, basically. My autoplay is working now. I guess I need to mute it. Maybe it's required now. But if I wanted to, I can unmute and my laptop is quiet. You can hear the video. Now we're gonna do basically the same exact thing as video, but we're gonna do it with audio instead. So you can just do audio and then your source is the slightly different, right? So we do have an audio folder and a turtle.mp3 file. So it's basically the same as our video, just in a different folder called audio, and it's an MP3 file instead of an MP4. And then here you also add the same, controls, autoplay, loop, muted, whatever you want. It also does have an end tag, and you can put in your browser doesn't support audio in between. So audio stuff works the same as video. You just use the audio tag instead of the video tag. Now, if you do have a video that you just want to play the audio for, you don't want there to be any visual, you can put a video file as the source for audio. It will just only play the audio of it. And so I'm going to just show you what the audio player looks like. It's this really basic thing down here, and it would play if I turn up my volume. So there's a couple other things that we can go through. One of them is going to be, we've made our links right here, but maybe we don't want the link to just be a text. Like maybe we want it to actually look a little bit like a button instead. So I'm going to add a button underneath my links. And to add the button, it is the tag button. The text that you put in between is going to be your button text. And if you want this to link to somewhere else, you can surround it in an A tag. So this is going to be a little bit of like some nesting tags. So you'll notice that I have on the outsides my start and my end of my A, which is my link. And then in between I have my button. And if I put my href, let's say to the USC website again, and I save, then I can go back. You'll notice that I get my button, the button text is there, and then I click and it does this link stuff again. So this is what your button looks like. So I'm going to show you one last visual thing in HTML, and I'm going to, if we have time, show you one more non-visual thing, or maybe two non-visual things. So you can also do tables in HTML. So I'm going to do an H2 at the bottom, and I'm going to say table. To create a table, you use the table tag. Thankfully, most of the tags in HTML, the words are what they are. Now, to create a row in your table, you use the tr element. So this is going to be one row. If you wanted to add a second row, you just add another tr element. Now, if you want to add the columns or the content, you add that with your table data. So in between your starting and ending for your table rows, you can do the td element, and this is for your table data. This creates the cells. However many cells that you put in will be how many columns that you have. So I'm just going to say data 1, we'll have data 2, and let's say data 3. And now if I save and show you what this looks like, and don't worry, I'll go back to the code. I get my table down here, and it has my one row. It doesn't show the other row because I didn't add any content to it, any data. And then I have my data 1, my data 2, my data 3. If I want to add more to the second row, you just have to add some sort of data in between that one. So now if I save this and I refresh, I get this filled out. So just a little recap of your table. Encapsulate everything in your table element. For each row, you use the tr. And then to create each cell, which determines how many columns you have, you use the td in your rows. Okay. I'm going to show you one last non-visual thing. So we're going to head back up to our head section, that metadata section. So all the way up here. Should probably be around line 4-ish. So as a reminder, our head section is our metadata. And I want to, I guess this is somewhat of a visual thing. Right now I get this kind of default icon, and I want to change that icon. So that's one of the things that we're going to do. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a bunch of meta tags that tell the browser just some more metadata about this web page. So let's start off with our icon because that's a little bit more fun. So if I go in here, I'm going to add a new line in my head or metadata section. In order to set our icon, we have to use the link element. So this is a little tricky. Remember the A element is your link that you're clicking on to go somewhere else. This link is just some sort of, we're linking this page to something else, but not in a clickable way. We're just associating some files together. We're going to use this next week to link our CSS with our HTML so that when we write our CSS, it impacts our HTML. So here, we need to specify a relationship. So we're going to do rel equals. And this is just basically kind of telling the code, like, what type of a link are we doing right now? And we're going to say icon. Now, there's a bunch of different types of icons that you can do. So we're going to add another attribute that further specifies the type of icon. And we're going to do type. So this is going to be our icon type equals. And then in our quotations, we're going to put in image / X icon. I don't know why it's called X icon, but this just basically stands for that little icon that shows up in your browser tab when someone visits. Now, this is where it gets slightly confusing. Remember when we were adding images, we used source to pull an image from somewhere else? Well, because now we're using link to point to an image, we're using href, okay? So to set the actual image, we do href equals, and then we do our same file path. So period / is located in our assets folder. This one is located in our logos folder. And this is just how I set it up. And then you'll notice that I have 4 options here, 2 for favicon. That's basically the colloquial name for this icon that we're doing. And then 1 for logo if you want to add it to like a navigation menu. And we have PNGs and SVGs. These are just 2 different types of file formats. So I'm going to do PNG here. And then remember to close out your link with that closing caret. So now if I save and I go back and I refresh, you'll notice that my browser icon is now that image file that I set. PNG is probably a image file format that you know. If you're curious, the biggest difference between a PNG file and a JPEG file, a PNG can have a transparent background, a JPEG will fill it with white. So if you're ever making something in Illustrator or Photoshop, some other thing, and you want to preserve a transparent background, use a PNG. Now, you might be curious what this SVG is, right? So if I open up my PNG one here, it's an actual image. You're used to this. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. You save it as an SVG, and an SVG is actually a piece of HTML code that you set lines and points and colors, and you can actually make like illustrations with your code. The thing with SVGs that are different from PNGs and JPEGs, you can scale it up as many times as you want, and because it's made up of code, it dynamically does, and you don't lose any resolution. So if you ever try to take like an image and you blow it up and it gets all blurry, that's because it's made out of pixels, where an SVG is made out of lines and shapes that scale easily. So we're going to go back to our HTML in index, and I want to show you some metadata stuff. So we're going to add a bunch of these meta tags. And the meta tag is just used to add metadata about your site or this page specifically. And this is just information that you're telling the browser, you're telling search engines about this web page. These aren't going to be displayed to users. These are just to help them kind of better understand your web content. The first thing that you might do is set a character set, which is going to be one of our attributes. The standard character set is UTF-8. This is just, there's different ways that different glyphs, so letters, symbols, numbers are encoded. UTF-8 is the global standard. It covers pretty much any letter, any symbol that you ever want to do. If you want to explore other ones, I encourage you to look it up. It gets a little confusing, but this is the standard. And this just makes sure that all of the things that you're writing get rendered out exactly how you want them to be. Now, the rest of these meta tags, we're going to do 2 attributes and then just change their values. So here we're going to do meta, and then we're going to do name equals author. And author is in between our quotations. So author is going to be the type of metadata that we're doing. So this name attribute is basically the metadata type. And then the content, which is going to be the value, you're going to put in your name. I'm going to put in the Digital Lounge, but you can put in what you want. So this just tells the browser and search engines who wrote this content. We can also add a meta name equals description. So this is going to be a short description that describes your web page content. When you search up things in Google or Bing or Yahoo and you see all of those results and you saw that like little description of the different web pages, that's this, is what we're configuring right now with our description meta. If you don't put anything, the search engine will just kind of take the first chunk of your website and start putting that in. So content, we can say, this is the Digital Lounge website. Ideally, you'd want something a little bit more descriptive. Okay, I'm going to go through two more meta stuff and then I'll pause for questions. So we're going to do meta name equals keywords. If any of you are into marketing and know search engine optimization, or even as like just a general concept, this is where you can specify some keywords that you want to tell search engines like, hey, if someone's searching this up, we recommend you use our content because this is relevant to these keywords. So in this case, I would probably use things like USC Annenberg, the Digital Lounge, maybe like web development. So all of your different keywords are separated by a comma. And then you can add spaces if you want. This bit just helps search engines better surface your content depending on what people are searching. And the last one, which is probably the most important out of all of these, we'll do meta name equals viewport. So in the tech world, whenever you hear viewport, that is just the screen that someone is looking at your thing with. So for example, my viewport right now is this MacBook. It's just this screen. I also have a tablet. So the viewport is the tablet screen. If I'm accessing from my phone, that's a different viewport screen. And this is basically saying when we add our content, what we want the web page to do based on the user's viewport. So the first thing that I'm going to do is say width equals device hyphen width. What this does is says the width of my web page should be the same width as the user's current screen. This helps to make sure that when you're accessing this content on different screens, that it doesn't look really weirdly sized. There's still some massaging some love that you have to do for responsive web design, which we'll cover in the third workshop. But this at least gets you somewhere. And the last thing that we add after this, we're going to do a comma space. We'll do a initial hyphen scale equals 1.0. What that bit of code says is it says how zoomed in or out you want this content to be. You're going to want it to be at 1. You're basically going to want the zoom to be at the size that you're setting everything to be. That's it for the HTML that we're going to write. I'm going to show you a neat little trick that I use sometimes if you want to play around with a site that is a little bit more fully fledged. So you have to use Google Chrome for this. Safari and Firefox do have some comparable options. I have not used them. You might have to search them up. But if you open up any website in Chrome and you right click on the page, or you can do control click, there will be this option for inspect. And when I click on inspect, I will get what is called the Chrome Developer Tools that pops up over here. So what Chrome DevTools is, it's a bunch of the backend stuff. And under the Elements panel, I can see all of the HTML code that makes up this homepage for usc.edu. So even if this website was made in a content management system like WordPress or Wix or whatever, it compiles into this HTML code, and you can edit this if you want. But don't worry, it will not screw over the USC website. It just allows you to play around with it, kind of see how they, compiled into this, what the HTML is for this. So, for example, if I go to the body section and let's say I right click and I delete the element, everything goes away because I got rid of the whole content section. But if I refresh, I re-get the files back from the server. So I'm not editing any of the actual code on the server. I'm not changing anything of the actual website, but I can see all of these HTML elements that make up this site. I can use this picker right here. It's a square with a arrow. And if I hover over different elements, I can see some of the code that makes it up. So I can see where the H2 is, I can see where the H1 is. And when I click on it, it takes me to that code over here in my elements panel. You can also see under styles where the CSS is, which we're going to go through next week. This is super helpful for that. You may also have noticed comments show up in here too. So where I said these comments are these little notes to yourself that don't get displayed, most people will never see them, but if someone knows how to use Chrome Developer Tools, they will. So don't write anything crazy if you're publishing. Or do. That's up to you. But yeah, we'll be using this a lot more with CSS to kind of like play around with and see some different things next week.